Welcome to Islamic Life Coach School Podcast. Apply tools that you learn in this podcast and your life will be unrecognizably successful. Now your host, Dr. Kamal Akhtar.
Hello everyone. Peace and blessings be upon all of you. In the previous podcast, I spoke about how you use your skepticism to avoid healing, and that is a part of your primal brain design that doesn't like change. I gave you a lot of examples on how even your intellect and your achievements can become an obstacle in your healing if your brain uses them to overanalyze rather than to implement, and if your brain uses it to create obstacles in your peace and joy. Today I'm going to talk to you about how the same lower brain uses religion to strengthen its skepticism towards healing. So it's still technically a part of that podcast where your brain justifies the skepticism, but I'm going to hyper-focus on how your brain uses religiosity to do so. And this is a very, very powerful concept. So I hope you're bracing yourself because this has a potential to blow you out of your seat. You, overall, as a Muslim woman, are very good at relying on religious scholars and traditional Islamic teachings. You're very good at researching and getting to the bottom of the appropriate ruling when it comes to, let's say, rulings about your period or rulings about your rights and duties around parenting or marriage, rulings about financial matters, wealth building. You appropriately research, you reach out to proper authorities, and they give you guidance. They tell you what is wrong and what is right, what is within the limits of Islam and what not to do, so that you can reach your goals that you set for yourself in this life. And you do all of that while hanging on to your religious values. This is all great news. This is what we want. This is why religious scholarship exists. This is why guidance in Quran and Sunnah exist. At the same time, a very interesting shift happens that I've noticed in my coaching very frequently, and that is that women will issue themselves a religious ruling when it comes to them staying in their suffering, and they will not look for any external evidence for those thoughts. They will not look for any type of scholarship to help them validate this. If your primal brain is using religion to remain skeptical of your healing, you will believe the first sentence that comes in your mind without looking for any guidance from religious experts. So what I'm highlighting is this dichotomy that exists, that your brain presents doubt when it comes to everyday matters, so you turn to appropriate resources, and these are highly reputable resources like books and scholars, and you use these resources to make a sound decision using your discernment. But on the other side of this dichotomy exists a phenomenon where you believe the very first nonsense that your primal brain feeds you without applying any level of questioning or discernment to it, without looking for any external evidence. What I mean to say is women are using religion to stay in suffering, and they're using religion as a tool of skepticism, not realizing that's what they're doing. Religious skepticism or self-sabotage using Islam sounds like, I should have more sabr. Maybe it's not in my qadr, and I shouldn't chase dunya. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changes hearts. I must make more dua. And because these words are Islamic, you don't notice the final result that you're creating in your life is still stagnation. The result is that you're suffering still. You're not becoming more patient, more honest, more regulated, or more connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're still staying in victimhood. You're still in pain while you think it's spirituality. Meaning, and my teacher Zakiya put this beautifully, you mistake and equate something that is unfamiliar with something that is doubtful in Islam or even haram. And this is your primal mind that uses religion against you to justify its own 3 covenants, which are conserve energy, avoid pain, and seek pleasure. This is a way to feel spiritual while you self-sabotage. This becomes a way of how you familiarize your pain, your suffering, and misgivings, and you equate them with religiosity. The whole point of religion is to create wellness. And if you use religion to keep yourself in the cycle of suffering, then it is not Islam. This is your practice as a Muslim and how you choose to relate to religion, which is a function of your mind. All of this is happening beyond your conscious mind. You don't knowingly do this, And this level of religious teaching where sabotage happens in the name of primal brain conserving energy, you will never find out this is happening in the background until you look actively towards it. The core thesis here is that the danger is not in Islam. The danger is when your lower nafs uses Islamic language to keep you from creating change. Your nafs will give you fatwas. It presents you different religious concepts to keep you in pain, and you accept it without any questions. The nafs weaponizes beautiful and correct religious concepts like sabr, qadr, tawakkul, gratitude, humility, and fear of the dunya to avoid change. If you're operating through this level of skepticism, you will use religious teachings to justify the pain that it is how it's supposed to be. And you will use religious teachings to shame yourself out of helping yourself. I find it so fascinating when I notice the same women that don't trust their religious knowledge about matters of daily life and rely on scholars and traditional teachings to tell them how to deal with these life affairs. And then all of a sudden, they become muftis when it comes to believing that a ruling should keep them in their own pain. Your lower brain suddenly becomes a religious scholar when healing requires effort. Your nafs is not a mufti. It did not stop you from resentment, gossip, catastrophizing. It did not stop you from your emotional explosions and reactivity. But the moment you want coaching, the moment you want nervous system regulation tools, therapy, the moment you want to set boundaries, suddenly it says, be careful, this is not Islamic? I mean, come on, what is that? So just take the concept of sabr, for example. The prophetic sabr was active, dignified, strategic, connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sabr by the lower brain uses it as a tool for self-abandonment. Sabr does not mean that you refuse help. It does not mean that you stay in suffering. Same way with qadr as a concept. It is not your excuse to stop participating in your life. You cannot say, maybe it's just not in my qadr, before you've tried. Qadr comforts you after sincere effort. It was not revealed so you could opt out of your own life. Dua does not replace action. It is not spiritual procrastination. You can ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to heal your marriage and learn communication skills. You can ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you confidence and practice courage. You ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in sincere dua to heal your child and still go to ABA therapy and still get your own nervous system under control. You can be grateful and want better things. You can say Alhamdulillah and still admit something hurts. Gratitude does not mean denial. Using gratitude by your lower nafs that calls itself a mufti will keep you in pain. Humility does not mean that you erase Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's gifts. You're not more humble just because you hide and you don't speak up. You're not more Islamic just because you undercharge for your services or you under-receive any help that you might have. True humility is using what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave you and expand your life without arrogance. Your nafs will quote Islam very loudly to justify mental suffering, and you will believe it. And this is the tragedy of the highest proportion. Your mind using religious language to familiarize and justify your pain. The good news here is that there's a very easy way to recognize it. Your lower brain is not a scholar. You will recognize what is happening when your nafs keeps you in a position where you make absolutely no progress. You are going to find yourself in a constant fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. The easiest way is to see how long have you been in emotional pain, and you will have your answer. The nafs will use religious doubt to save energy. Unfamiliarity does not mean un-Islamic, but yet so many of you are using tawakkul to create learned helplessness. If you've never heard someone talk about nervous system regulation, coaching, embodiment, emotional safety, or pleasure through an Islamic lens, your mind will immediately label it suspicious. Through this mechanism that I'm describing, a lot of women mistake unfamiliar for haram, while the Quran itself constantly asks you to reflect, observe, reason, and examine. If you're learning a new framework that helps you stop yelling, stop ruminating, stop people-pleasing, stop resenting, stop reacting inside your own life, you do not need to reject it just because it's new and unfamiliar. This is one of the most deceptive things your nafs will do. It will speak in religious vocabulary. When you hear a new concept in English, you might say, "This sounds Western. This doesn't sound Islamic." Be careful. I want you to notice what is happening here. You never evaluated whether the idea is contradicting the Quran and Sunnah. You never reached out to the religious authority. You simply noticed that it was unfamiliar, and the nafs reminded you of a ruling that you might have heard long ago. And then, in that case, your mind replaces the word unfamiliar with dangerous. And this is what I was talking about earlier, that it sounds like discernment when it is not. What makes this so dangerous is that your nafs knows that you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you more than you love yourself. It knows that. If it simply said, "I'm afraid to change," you would recognize your irrational fear and you will push through it. So, instead, it borrows language of religion and it disguises comfort as caution. And of course, shaitan feeds off of it too. It disguises resistance as righteousness. In the meanwhile, you know that this is the voice of your nafs or shaitan because you're living a life of emotional suffering. You're not progressing. Your relationships are suffering. In which case, you know that the goal here was to never protect your deen or your aqidah. The goal was to protect your current identity of pain. So just notice from now on, if your inner voice suddenly becomes an expert in fiqh, the moment healing requires effort. If you decide to learn emotional regulation and your mind says, "I should have more sabr," if you begin to understand trauma patterns and suddenly you hear, "Maybe I'm overcomplicating things," just be on to your brain. Be very careful and eavesdrop on it about what it's trying to feed you. The outcome in your life that you create as a result of these thoughts will show you if the thought was coming from the nafs and the shaitan, or if it was coming from your highest mind and values. The same voice will remain strangely silent when you spend hours replaying arguments in your head when you're doom scrolling or gossiping. It will stay completely quiet when you're catastrophizing or you're oversharing because that is your safety net. The nafsi mufti will rarely interrupt the habit that keep you trapped, and it becomes deeply concerned when something threatens these memorized emotional patterns. That in itself should make you curious. Islam has never been afraid of sincere investigation. You're allowed to ask questions, to evaluate ideas. You're allowed to examine whether a framework produces the very qualities that Islam calls you towards, whether it's ihsan or mercy or emotional stability. If a framework helps your reactivity, it stops you from avoiding healthy conflict. It stops your people-pleasing patterns. Then dismissing it simply because it uses unfamiliar language says more about your nervous system than it says about Islam. The only fatwa, the only religious teaching that your nafs will remind you of will keep you in pain. And the irony is that you already trust countless tools that are not mentioned in the Quran or Sunnah. I mean, you wear your eyeglasses, you take antibiotics, you drive cars, you use your phone, your GPS. You undergo surgery if you have appendicitis. You purchase a flight to go see your family. You trust MRI machines to diagnose disease. None of these existed in the Prophet ﷺ's lifetime. Yet you never question whether using them somehow weakens your tawakkul. You understand that they're simply means that Allah SWT created for your benefit. But the moment a tool addresses your mind and the healing of your body, the mind suddenly changes the rules. Another irony is that you scrutinize every possible solution while rarely questioning the beliefs that have been producing suffering for years. You demand evidence for coaching, but you never ask of evidence from the thought that says nothing will change. You question modalities of regulation, the price of these modalities, but you never question your anger. You compare and contrast the financial commitment of all of these modalities, but you accept your anxiety as an absolute truth. Your nafs will keep you skeptical of the medicine while it will keep you completely loyal to your illness. You are haram policing yourself to stay in self-sabotage. Staying in endless caution without curiosity to move forward keeps you exactly where you are. And your nafs loves that. It would rather spend years debating whether healing is permissible than to allow you to experience the healing itself. Because the healing will bring you closer to Allah. As long as you remain uncertain, you never have to commit. As long as you remain skeptical, you never have to practice. And you can remain careful just so you don't have to transform. The real question you should ask is to filter out the error of this Mufti Nafs, and that is, does this actually contradict Islam? Or does it simply challenge the version of me that has become comfortable with staying the same? Haram policing yourself is a spiritual label for self-sabotage. And some of the very common lines I hear my clients and friends say is, I'm becoming too attached to the dunya. And this happens the moment you start building a successful business, or investing in your health, or improving your marriage. Your mind will suddenly say, maybe you're becoming worldly. And yet, it never says anything when you're attached to people's approval, when you're attached to your victimhood. Somehow, ambition of excellence becomes suspicious, while attachment of suffering goes unquestioned. Islam does not condemn excellence. Not only that, it calls you towards excellence, in this world and the next. Islam just condemns making this world your God, and there is a huge difference. And I also very commonly hear, maybe this isn't in my qadr. And like you know what your qadr is. Instead of using qadr as a source of peace after sincere effort, your lower brain uses it before effort has begun, or if your effort has failed. It uses it to predict the future, when you as a human cannot fathom your future. You do not know what your qadr holds. If you haven't practiced emotional regulation or communication skills, and somehow your conclusion is already, maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just didn't write this for me, this is a wrong use of the concept of qadr. This is going to stop you from participating in your own life. Another belief I hear is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't burden a soul beyond what it can bear. And instead of hearing this ayah as a source of hope, your lower brain turns it into a permission to suffer. You use it to tolerate unhealthy dynamics and create more and more pressure in your life. You refuse help because, after all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said you could bear it. That is absolutely the wrong use of this concept. Another sentence I commonly hear is that I'm just trying to be grateful, while using gratitude as another hiding place. This becomes an excuse for you to stop pursuing excellence in health and wealth just because you have so much more compared to others. At this time, you just have to remember that gratitude and growth are not mutually exclusive. Another line I hear is that I don't want to judge anyone. Your lower brain loves this one because it keeps you from exercising discernment. You will ignore red flags and you will stay in unhealthy relationships, and you will overlook manipulative behavior because you're using this excuse of not judging anyone because judging people feels un-Islamic. But the teaching behind this is not to abandon your wisdom and your instinct. You're not using judgment to criticize their worth before Allah as a human being. What you're doing is safeguarding yourself against their harmful behavior. You're being discerning of whether their behavior is safe for your life or not. Another line I hear is that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can change hearts, which is absolutely true. But your lower brain uses that as a truth to avoid changing your own behavior. Yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changes hearts, but He also repeatedly commands you to purify your own. Another very common line I hear is that I'm trying to be humble. And women use this so commonly because humility becomes the same thing as self-erasure. You use this to justify the fact that somebody else got the promotion even though you were working harder. You don't speak up. You minimize your accomplishments and your contributions. True humility is knowing that every gift comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala while using those gifts in His service. Shrinking yourself will not make your deen and your iman bigger. And this last one is one of my favorite ones. Maybe this suffering is bringing me closer to Allah. And while suffering does bring you closer to Allah, but your lower brain will take this beautiful truth and conclude that you must remain in unnecessary suffering at all times, otherwise you will not be spiritual enough. And it uses this to justify your moral superiority over others. If this dangerous pattern remains in your subconscious, you will protect your pain because losing it almost will feel like losing your connection to Allah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not the Lord of hardship only. He is also the Lord of sakina, mercy, expansion, joy, ease, happiness. If your suffering has already taught you its lesson, you do not need to earn extra reward by refusing to graduate from it. After all of this awareness that I've created, one question I want you to leave with today is, if the voice in your mind tells you to stay exactly where you are, while convincing you that this is what Allah wants for you, whose voice do you think this actually is? This is the Nafs and the shaitan. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls you towards life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls you towards purification and excellence, while Nafs will call you towards familiarity. Maybe your greatest act of worship is not suffering longer. It is refusing to let your Nafs issue another fatwa over your life. That is the moment when healing truly begins. With that, I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, never let my nafs speak louder than your guidance. Protect me from using your beautiful religion to justify my suffering. Allow me to use it to comfort myself and to heal myself. Ya Allah, give me the courage to embrace any and every means of healing you have placed in front of me. Purify my heart from self-deception and make me among those who seek what brings us closest to you. Ameen Ya Rabbal Alameen. Please keep me in your du'as. I will talk to you guys next time. I am truly honored that you are here in my circle. And if you or someone you know is raising a child on the autism spectrum, I want to personally invite you to join my program, the Ummi Collective. This is a weekly coaching program for Muslim mothers where I help you build the skills to raise independent and successful neurodivergent children, while also supporting you as a woman in the process. If you're struggling right now, but deep down you know that your child has incredible potential, and you want to support that potential the best way possible, this program is exactly for you. Use the link in the show notes to apply for the program at a discounted price. I would be honored to welcome you inside the Ummi Collective.